Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back to Careers Beyond Academia, hosted by Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design. My name is Sonam Dubey, and I'm the Scientific Manager with Medicine by Design. For anyone who's new to this series, the primary goal of this series is to expose as many trainees as possible to different job roles that are available after a degree in the life sciences, and to start to understand the qualification and the experience necessary to secure that role. Both Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design have teamed up to host this series. And our goal is to highlight a wide variety of careers that are available for you after your degree. All of the sessions that we host are posted on Stem Cell Network's YouTube channel, and this one will also be posted in the next few days. So feel free to check out the previous sessions, as well as, if you want to watch this one again, you're welcome to do so. We have other training events that are also occurring monthly, so feel free to check out both of our websites. In particular, I want to bring your attention to a upcoming program that is hosted by Medicine by Design. It's called Summer by Design, and it's an international training program for trainees that we accept from all over the world, and is primarily focused on teaching the trainees the different aspects of commercialization of regenerative medicine. So it's an 8-day intensive program here hosted at the university, and the applications are open until January 22nd. So please check out the website and apply today. Just a few notes about the session. The session will be recorded, except for the Q&A portion. So feel free to come online and ask your question live, or you can put your question in the Q&A box. Both the speakers will have 10 to 12 minutes to speak each, and we will have a joint Q&A or panel discussion after both speakers have spoken. So please save your questions till the end. Without further ado now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. So our first speaker is Dr. Paul Nagy. Paul is the Medical Director for the Specialty Care and Oncology Therapeutic Areas at GSK Canada, a company that aims to positively impact the health of 2.5 billion people by the end of 2030. Paul leads a team of approximately 20 individuals who are responsible for the strategic and operational execution of scientific engagement, evidence generation, and medical education across several disease areas. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much, and great introduction, Sonam. Thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen, so apologies for 1 second while that loads. And just a verbal confirmation that you can see my slides, Sonam.
Yes, I can.
Perfect, because I've lost my view of you, so I will go through the slides, and I hear the 10-minute ask as well, so I'll do my best. So thank you, everybody, for joining today and coming to listen to Christa and I share our experience beyond academia. I'm going to go through my story sort of as quickly as possible, and then really open it up for Q&A. So I hope that everyone kind of has some questions to ask, and that maybe I have some answers. That's really the goal today. So as Sona mentioned, my name is Paul Nagy. I am the medical director, one of the medical directors at GSK Canada, and I look after the specialty care and oncology business within our Canadian organization. So let me move to our next slide. There we go. So really just to summarize again, you've seen the position we've talked about it a few times, and GSK Canada is a pharmaceutical company based in Mississauga, and we work, of course, to the mission that Sonam shared earlier. We work within many different therapeutic areas, including oncology, respiratory, vaccines, and specialty care. And like I mentioned, my responsibilities fall into the specialty care and oncology space. Most recently, my degree and credentials are from the University of Toronto, from the Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology Department. And that was a PhD that I achieved from that particular educational center. So let me walk through it with a bit more detail. I think this part's really interesting. And For me, I don't think of this as a linear path, and it's something I'll come back to later on. And it's something that I want to send as a message that it doesn't always have to be a linear path when you think of career progression. But it's easy to look at it this way. So we'll share it this way, and then I'll go into more detail. But I started my scientific career, so to speak, at Carleton University in Ottawa. It was a BSc that I achieved in biochemistry. Um, and then quickly out of that degree, I moved into industry for a company called Apotex. This is Canada's largest generic pharmaceutical company, and I was working within a space that was actually working on innovative medicines within that broader organization. In scientific information and clinical operations, there were two different jobs there that I worked over the course of 2 years. And sort of that's the first bit of unconventional path that I always like to share, because people are always surprised to see out of a BSc going into industry. And for me at that point, I sort of felt like that was the end of my path, and that I had found that job that I was really hopeful to get. It was in the sciences, it was working with medicine, having an impact on the treatment and care for patients. I thought I had made it. But it was my supervisor at the time, who was an MD PhD himself, and he really just instilled on me, in order to kind of move into different spaces, it's not a necessity, but having an advanced degree is super helpful. And that's what really triggered me to move into getting a PhD at University of Toronto. So I kind of separate them on the timeline, top and bottom, because the top are the academics, the bottom are the career jobs that I've had. But what's I really think is sort of unconventional for many is just moving back and forth between. And I think that's totally okay to say, I was in the industry, I saw a path, there was a limitation that I saw coming, and I think that that's why I really wanted to get back to school, look at different sorts of credentials, achieve that PhD, which I did with Sonam, actually, our host today, from Sunnybrook in Toronto, in neurosciences. And it was sort of a space that I didn't have a lot of experience in, to be completely honest with you, but I was able to demonstrate that my past experience in biochemistry was translatable. And I call it the neuroscience piece because, as you can see, this will be another theme for my story, which I'm happy to get more and more into. But my first career out of my PhD was not in neurosciences. It was in respiratory disease. And it was as, oh, you know what? I'm realizing an error on this, so because I think there is a big gap there between 2014 and 2017, which should be called out. I started as an MSL, a medical science liaison at GSK Canada in respiratory. And I was able to make connections between some of the networks that are used in the brain, the central nervous system, with the peripheral nervous system, and obviously was able to kind of demonstrate some of my skill in it, being able to talk about respiratory disease. But it was, again, another career jump, which is unconventional. It's moving into a different space, but it's part of my story. Started with GSK as an MSL, did that work for 3 years before moving into the MSL manager space for the respiratory team. And that's where the slides get back on target here. I can use my pointer if that works, which was a 3-year stint that I did within the respiratory business. And then saw an opportunity to move into yet another therapeutic area, oncology, and did that for 3 years as a senior MSL manager. So still looking after the management of the people who are in charge of engaging with our science externally, working with experts, and having those discussions. And then finally, this is the most recent career progression that I've had, is taking the experience that I'd captured so far and joining in as the medical director, which essentially has oversight of not only MSLs, but also a lot of our in-office, head office-based strategic teams that are there to help drive our medical business within the company. So moving along to the role in a quick glance, my most current role that I'm in. I'll start with the second bullet. I know it's a little out of order, but what does a medical director do? I think when I think of myself, I often think of the entire team. What our entire team does is provides medical and scientific support, leadership to all of the different interdepartmental teams across our business. So of course that means within medical affairs, a lot of the folks in my group are in charge of making sure that we understand the science and the medical landscape as closely as possible, so that we can help inform and help support and help lead different departments like clinical, like regulatory for the approval of medicines, market access to ensure that patients have access to these medicines when the time comes, HEOR, which is health economics and outcomes research, marketing, commercial, all these different areas of a pharmaceutical business need that scientific leadership and support. And that's really what me and my team try to offer, is that kind of expert level knowledge of all the different products that we support. So in order to get that place that I'm at now, what's typical, and I say typical because I pulled this off of an online website resource, is that many of the people in this state have an MD or a PhD in a medical or a scientific domain, and generally have kind of captured somewhere between 11 and 15 years of experience. I happen to fall kind of in that space as well, having been in the industry for about 10 or 11 years. But this is sort of the average for this type of role. And the pieces I'll call it in terms of key skills. There's so much that I could have drilled down on here, but I think the parts that I'll talk about for key skills are really the leadership, agility, and decision making. Because, and I want to call it agility especially. Every day is a little bit unique and different. Every challenge requires different thinking, and I think that ability to kind of be flexible, but to kind of one way go with the flow, but the other way make a lot of decisions that are based on not having enough information is sometimes part of the job that just has to happen. You won't always have all the answers. And then quick glance, other things I considered. I don't know if this is indicative of other people who would be qualified for the role, but I was looking at being a scientist, of course, when I was doing my PhD academic work. I thought I could do that forever, decided I didn't want to. I had applied to Teachers College. That didn't pan out because I didn't get accepted, so I kind of dead into that pathway. And laboratory technician. I think for me, it was clear that I wanted to be in the sciences, but I wasn't quite sure where and how. So when that MSL opportunity came about, it was something that I thought was really, really appealing. And just in the last couple of minutes, I'm going to move a little bit quickly because I think there's a lot of great things we can discuss here, but I'm really curious to first hear from Christa, but also to hear the questions that you have. But to speak more about the medical director role, I've pulled out a couple of the typical things that I do on a day-to-day basis, kind of moving clockwise from strategy. It's really critical when you're running any business to have a good plan. And it sounds very trivial, but a lot of the work that I'm responsible for is making sure that our medical and scientific plan is sound, that it's data-driven, and that it's based on the environment that we work within. So a lot of the work that we do on an annual cycle, but then just throughout the year, is making sure that our strategy is strong. Because what we set from a head office level, from the director level, it's cascaded down to all of our teams and really does impact our entire business. So there's a huge accountability there for me. From an operations perspective, it is a business. There are stakeholders, there's people accountable to what we do. There's also performance objectives that we have to meet as a business to ensure that we're hitting our strategy. So a portion of my day or week is involved with just making sure that we are on track to our plans. And that could be financial plans, it could be against our objectives, it could be you name it. And I think that that's a piece that from a directive perspective, at least within GSK Canada, the accountability on that does, again, fall back to me. KEE engagement. So this is key external expert engagement. I mentioned before having that outside-in perspective and making sure our plans are fit for purpose in Canada. So a lot of what I do is actually meeting with experts, meeting with physicians, with specialists, with oncologists to share and discuss and make sure that what we are doing as a business aligns to the needs that they have to treat their patients better. So I'm out there directly working with them and having meetings and discussions to do just that. And then someone mentioned I have a team, about 20 people right now. A lot of the work that you need from any manager of people is just making sure that there is a healthy team environment within it, and that you have that really good, strong collective of people who are all passionate about what they do, that they feel able to do it really well, and that they have the tools to excel at their jobs. So how can I enable the team to be better? It's always on my mind as a manager or director of any group of people. So now I know we're almost out of time, and I don't want to kind of go too long in this, and maybe some of this we can touch on with the Q&A. But I think just in like a really quick sentence, you know, I really do enjoy this role because I think that the impact you can have on patients, the impact that you can have on providing opportunities for people through the medicines that we deliver as a business, and doing it the right way is what brings me passion. Um, in the kind of country role of a major organization, you do get to work directly with the doctors who are prescribing these medicines. You do get to kind of understand what their needs are and really, I guess, when the rubber hits the road, have that impact that we hope to have as an entire industry. So I think that there are a lot of really great things that I pull out on a daily basis that bring me energy. Um, and maybe I'll jump right ahead to future career opportunities for this role, as a kind of a frequently asked question. There's quite a bit. There's another level of senior leadership within the medical organization in Canada called the country medical director within my company, which means that it goes beyond just specialty care and oncology. It actually touches on all of our different areas that we operate. Um, it took me a while to kind of appreciate this with the way that the industry is set up, but there's global organization as well as the country organization. There's always opportunities for me to move into what we call global, which is a centralized group that kind of builds strategy for all the different countries around the world. There are a number of different kind of steps in terms of medical leadership that I can take. But at the same time, you've seen my path. It's not always conventional. And you can also look at different areas around the pharma business, including commercial marketing, market access, regulatory. I think what's really exciting about this type of role is you gain experience that really kind of bridges you to all those sorts of different spaces. The last thing I'll say, this is my last slide, talking about career planning advice. And I put this little cartoon here because I hope that these pieces of advice are worth at least 5 cents. They're sort of my opinions based on what's worked well for me and what I see when I bring people kind of into our business and work with other people. First is get clear on what you want, and research your target company. And when I say those two together, when you apply, when you're looking for a job, I think first of all, you have to know what brings you passion so that you can tell those stories with conviction and with an interesting take when you're interviewing. Um, because you have to enjoy your work and you have to show that you're passionate. You have to differentiate yourself based on those things that you think are important to you. And if those mesh up with the company, this is why researching the company is important, then it's a really good match. And I think that that's the piece where you can help differentiate yourself if you demonstrate why you are a match to join an organization versus kind of going in there with like, here's my experience. I like science. Let's get me into this role. Demonstrate really why it is that you're interested in this. It's been a theme throughout my entire talk. Career paths are not always linear. I stole this from an online resource that basically demonstrated that somewhere around 20% of career paths in Canada are not linear. You're going to go into different things, and that's okay. And I think the last piece is be kind. Last story, I swear. When I was first leaving the PhD space and moving into industry the second time, I think I applied to somewhere between 50 and 60 different jobs before I heard anything back at all. And that was different pharma companies, it was different roles within pharma, it was different roles within medical or industry, you name it. I was exploring and trying everything. It took a long time before you kind of got that first call back. And then you got to practice the next steps of interviewing and really finding out what you want to do. Um, but I think it's important to be kind to yourself. It's not always an easy process, and there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. Um, but I do always believe that there's a right time for everything and that these opportunities will present themselves if you keep at it. So very high level advice, but I'll stop with that point so that Christa can share. We can get into the full discussion. But Sonam, for now, I will turn it back to you to carry us into our next section.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Paul. That was incredible talk and motivating with lots of good advice there. So we will now move on to our next speaker. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Christa Studzinski. Christa is the Director of Business Development and Partnerships and has spent the last 12 years working at Ontario Brain Institute, where she creates partnerships that help get evidence-based solutions into the community, where people are living with and receiving care for their brain disorders. So without further ado, welcome, Christa.
Thank you, Sonam. And while I pop up my slides to share, I'm just going to say that, oh my goodness, Paul, we really have been living parallel lives, and some of things that you mentioned in your talk are going to come up again in mine. So I think you should be able to see my slides now.
Yes, I can see them.
Perfect. Okay, give me a second here. So I'm Christa. I am a director at the Ontario Brain Institute, and the Ontario Brain Institute is a nonprofit who is primarily funded by the Ontario government, and our role is to advance evidence-based brain health solutions. Before joining OBI, I did a PhD at the University of Toronto, and I did an undergrad at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. So, like Paul, my career kind of sort of was not a straight road. During my PhD, I had the unique opportunity actually to do a lot of industry-related projects through my PhD. And so as part of that process, we actually, my lab mates and I decided to co-found a company. So while I was doing my PhD, we also co-founded a company, and we were kind of doing that on the side. And something that we often see in academia, where you've got a company on the side. Anyways, I finished my PhD, and at that time I thought I wanted to be an academic. So I went off and I did not one, but 2 postdocs, one in Kentucky, one back at the University of Toronto. And by 2011, I kind of figured out that I did not want to continue to pursue a career in academia. And at the time, you know, not a lot of people were talking about careers outside of academia. They didn't have panels like this. They didn't have a lot of, you know, networking opportunities. And so it was really a tough time to kind of go through that. You know, like Paul said, be kind to yourself. It's almost like a mourning process. I had people say to me, you know, why did you do a PhD? What a waste. I can now say that that wasn't the case. But anyways, in 2012, I joined OBI, and I joined as an intern. It was a 4-month position. There was no guarantees of follow-on employment, and it really was transformative in terms of my career. So I've been here for 12 years, and I've gone through increasingly more senior roles. I initially started out as more of a research program manager, so managing some of our strategic research programs that are run across Ontario. And then in about 5 years ago, I transitioned to more of a business development role because I was doing a lot of those industry research partnerships off the side of my desk. And it was something that, as an organization, we felt was important. And they gave me the opportunity to sort of focus in more on that full time. So people in my role in a nonprofit typically have some sort of university degree. Increasingly, you're seeing a master's or higher, oftentimes an MBA or a PhD. You'll notice I put a little asterisk there because, you know, it doesn't mean that if you don't have those education, that you will never be successful in this role. You know, we have people within our organization that are at the manager level and have a Bachelor of Science degree. So, you know, it's being able to complement that university education with that real world on-the-job training. People at my level within our organization typically have 10 plus years industry experience, potential salary range. So what I do, here's the most important part about my role, is basically I go out and talk to different partners to try and get tech into the hands of patients. So we work with a lot of startup companies. We funded over 100 neurotech companies in the last 12 years, and they all want to get their technology scaled and adopted and out into the real world. And so my role is working with patient partners and community partners to try and get this real world validation done in the context of sort of more of a non-academic setting. And I always say that, you know, you could have the best neurotech in the world. It could be the most predictable. It could be the most accurate. But at the end of the day, if patients don't want to use it because it involves some kind of very obvious, like I joke, you know, a big purple arrow on your head saying, I'm using this device, it's not going to matter. And so we really need to make sure that we're bringing in those patient perspectives right up front. And then we're also seeing how these technologies work in the real world, where things are messy and complex, and people don't just have one brain disorder, but maybe have Alzheimer's and diabetes, or have epilepsy, and depression. So some of the key skills related to my role, relationship management is super, super, super important for what I do. I'm always talking to people. The trust piece, especially when working with patient groups and community groups, is vital. It takes a really long time to build, and you can lose it in an instant. So being able to manage those relationships and have those hard conversations in an authentic and transparent way is super important. Problem solving, project management, all of those things, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're doing at OBI is sort of reinventing and looking at problems and trying to solve them in a different way. So no one else has ever really done some of the things that we're trying to do. And so being able to think creatively and come up with innovative solutions based on, you know, taking something that's worked in another sector and applying it to ours and those types of things. Careers I considered. So like Paul, you know, I went down that academic path. I mentioned it earlier on in my introduction. And then I thought, I don't want to do academia anymore. So maybe I'll go to pharma. And thought about pharma for a little bit, thought about tech transfer for a little bit. And then during my time at OBI, I've also kind of explored other opportunities. Pharma is still very much an option. Insurance companies or health wellness companies. So increasingly what we're seeing in the sector is that it's not just med device companies and pharma companies that are in this space. You're seeing companies like Shoppers Drug Mart and Loblaws and TELUS Health getting involved in trying to improve patient outcomes and offering solutions that to their clients. So what do I do in a day? A lot of times I spend, you know, for me, it's really important to be out there, not sitting in an office, sitting behind my desk, behind my computer. I need to be out there talking to people, trying to find out what's happening in the ecosystem, sharing information about the OBI model and some of the approaches that we're taking to make sure that patients are getting access to the latest and greatest evidence-based brain health solutions, working with startups and multinationals in the context of, you know, they see a lot of stuff on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure Paul could tell you lots of stories. And sometimes it's really hard to figure out where they want to partner, what they want to do. And so we can help them with those things. The other thing I spend a lot of time doing increasingly is guiding and advising. So, you know, I manage our external internship program. So working with interns and helping them figure out where they want to go with their careers. I often find myself mentoring more junior OBI staff, especially when they're thinking about their next step in their career. Patient groups, guiding and advising them in the context of how do we even begin to think about testing a neurotech? What does that look like? What questions do we need to be asking? What's an ethics application? And then again, on the multinational side, I've already talked about this a little bit, but guiding and advising in the context of, you know, this technology looks really interesting to us. How do we go about validating it to know if it really is doing what they say it can be doing? And so helping them develop their clinical validation assessments, almost like a consultant. And then the last thing I spend a lot of time doing is developing and operationalizing strategy. So, you know, identifying gaps in the ecosystem. And the example I'll use is really about this adoption and scaling issue. You know, companies are developing these technologies, but they can't scale in their home market. Patient groups and people living with brain disorders are increasingly trying to look towards technology to try and use it, but they don't know which ones to use. And so by identifying that gap, we were able to come up with a solution. And we've since been able to develop a program that can help address those gaps and see if we can help solve it. And so once I've identified that opportunity that could potentially fill a gap, working on operationalizing that solution, you know, getting buy-in from internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, piloting programs and solutions and iterating and adapting and learning from the pilots, and then eventually scaling the program into something that's sustainable, and, you know, getting funding for all of those things. So why my role is important? You know, I like to write the analogy I always use about my role is there are lanes. You know, people are really good, certain individuals are really good about swimming in their lanes and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they've kind of got you know, they know exactly where they're headed. What I do is I color between the lanes. I kind of act as that person who's sort of swimming between the different lanes, trying to look at how do I bring these different groups together so that what they're doing and what these guys are doing over here, if you bring them together, can actually be much more impactful, and we can help make sure that patients are benefiting from some of these solutions. I've been at OBI for 12 years, mostly because I've been able to be flexible. They've given me the flexibility to be creative and to kind of look at problems and try to come up with ideas on how we might be able to solve them. Brain health and improving patient outcomes is something that is super personal to me. So, going back to Paul's comment about finding your passion and finding that match with the organization, the core values for our organization are very personal to me. So this is part of why I love what I do. And I've been here for 12 years and, I get to meet some really interesting people and see some really interesting technologies and come up with, crazy ideas about how we might be able to address a problem and see what happens. Increasingly, I think what I've come to appreciate as I've matured through my career is that one of the biggest challenges with partnerships and managing relationships and, trying to do some of these innovative projects is really about trying to figure out how to manage different personalities and working styles. Some people are very extroverted, whereas others are more introverted. Some people are not risk averse, whereas others are very risk averse. Some people are detail oriented and others are not. And so trying to figure out how to mesh those different personality styles, who often end up in different types of roles and different types of projects, to kind of make something really great happen. In terms of next steps for me, certainly within my organization or in the nonprofit sector, a VP or a C-suite type role. But like Paul, the world is sort of your oyster. The nice thing about where I've been and the things that I've done is that I could go to pharma, or I could go to an insurance company, or I could go to government, or, there's really lots of opportunities for where I could go next. And really depends on where I want my career to go. I'll finish up with 3 very quick pieces of advice. Number 1, and I say this to every single intern that starts at OBI, and I do an exit interview with every single intern that works at OBI. And when they come in, I say, start networking now. It's never too late. Reach out to people on LinkedIn. Now with COVID and all of the Zoom world kind of becoming more prevalent, it's a lot easier to do a networking coffee. Ask lots of questions. People love talking about themselves. So just keep asking questions and build those networks, and it's never too soon. So when I do the exit interview with the interns, every single intern tells me that they wish they'd started networking sooner. So start now, it's not too late. Number 2 is you don't need to know exactly what you want to do. You're still early on in your careers. Paul alluded to the fact that careers are not linear. I sort of say it in a slightly different way. I say, I'm however many years into my career, 15 plus years into my career. When I look back at my journey, I can tell a really great story. When I was living it, I had no idea where I was going to end up, and really approached it as okay, I'm going to do this for a while, see what I like, see if I like it. And if I do, great, I'll keep doing it for a while. If I don't, I'll find something else. And so, if you don't like it, worst case, you do it for a couple months and you realize, or 6 months, and you're like, okay, this is not for me. I'm going to look for something else, and I can file this into my experience bucket. And who knows when it might become relevant. And I already said 3, so I'm going to skip that. And I think that's all I have. That's all I have. So Sonam, over to you.
Thank you, Christa. So we'll have, first of all, I'd like to thank both of our speakers. That was very insightful. And I'm sure that we can have a really good follow-up Q&A discussion.